Hello everyone. Today I would like to give you a brief introduction to the history of the Jowo Buddha statue in Lhasa and its profound merits. Why am I introducing the Jowo Buddha statue to you today? It is because I have been reading some materials recently and I have this constant feeling that in our human world, the Jowo Buddha statue is incredibly precious. Whether for Buddhists or non-Buddhists, it is of great importance to all of humanity. Of course, for those without faith, when we talk about the merits of a Buddha statue, they might not necessarily be interested in learning about it. This is perfectly understandable. However, from a historical perspective or from the standpoint of human values, for our human world, this Jowo Buddha statue is indeed truly precious. Lately, I have often heard about people going on pilgrimages to Mount Kailash. Certainly, a pilgrimage to Mount Kailash is very important, regardless of the religion, such as in Nepal or India. Various traditions regard it as a sacred site, each with its own history. Buddhists also have great faith in Mount Kailash and a deep aspiration to visit it. Seeing so many people traveling there, I feel it is a very meaningful thing to do. However, in my personal view, perhaps a pilgrimage to Mount Kailash is not as vital as visiting the Jowo Buddha statue. Perhaps this is related to one's personal belief and individual devotion. Now, I would like to briefly introduce the Jowo Buddha statue in the Jokhang Temple of Lhasa. It also has another name, known as the life-sized statue of the Buddha at age 12. This statue is indeed extremely significant. First, I would like to briefly describe its origins. From the time of the Buddha, it traveled through India and various other realms, eventually reaching the Han region. From the Han region it was brought to Lhasa. After many years in Lhasa, it has remained enshrined in the Jokhang temple for people to come and pay their respects. We often see many Tibetans on the roads to Lhasa, prostrating every 3 steps over thousands of miles, on their pilgrimage to the Jowo Buddha statue. There are different perspectives on this. Some believe that Tibetan people are truly great. They possess such a devout faith, relying on which they make their way to Lhasa. Others feel that this is a meaningless action. There are all sorts of different views. In my personal opinion, although among these Tibetan people, many may not have high levels of formal education, in the very marrow of their bones, there is an exceptionally devout faith. This deep devotion, whether it stems from their history or from their own spiritual conviction, makes what they do very, very meaningful, especially going to worship the Jowo Buddha statue. It is a wish held in the heart of every single Tibetan. Particularly for the older generations, they feel that if one comes into this world and does not worship the Jowo Buddha, it is a great regret. Therefore, it is a heartfelt aspiration for many to pay homage to this statue at least once in their lifetime. Some children who are very filial also do everything in their power to bring their parents to Lhasa to worship the statue during their lifetime. I personally feel the same way. From a certain point of view, this might not seem meaningful to everyone, particularly from the perspective of those without faith. They might not find it particularly admirable. But in another sense, it truly holds a very deep significance. I can really sense that for these elders and people of the past, although they may not be experts in modern technology or contemporary culture, not being so well versed in them, the values that exist within their mind streams might be something many scholars in the world cannot necessarily match. So we hope that everyone can take an impartial perspective and frequently observe their own behaviors in all aspects. This is very important. What I want to say today is that whether you have faith or not, the most important thing is that within your lifetime, especially for devoted Buddhists, during your life, it is best to go and worship the Buddha statue at least once. And before such a sublime Buddha statue, make an aspiration and dedicate your roots of virtue. Because it hasn't been very convenient lately, I haven't been able to go to Lhasa. But in the past, I went to worship this statue for many years. For many years, I went every year consecutively. So what I want to say today is many people go to worship Mount Kailash or go here and there on pilgrimage. Especially in 2026, it is said they should worship other sacred mountains, even some minor ones. They all feel it is worth the pilgrimage. There are various ideas and rumors. Of course, these may well be valid, and there is nothing wrong with going. But I have always believed that as people of faith, or as people seeking true values, we should also be selective about the objects of our worship, because a representation like the Jowo Buddha statue, such a sublime support support is likely nowhere else to be found in the entire world today. Especially from a Buddhist perspective, this Buddha statue is extremely important. Why do I say that? Let me first give you a brief introduction to its history. I would like to tell you a bit about it. As for the Jowo Buddha statue, it has weathered many storms throughout history, traveling through different places until it reached present-day Lhasa. Regarding its origins, we must rely on authentic historical records. For those more hidden or profound aspects, we can only use scriptural authority and reliable text to establish our understanding. This is the method used by all scholars, past and present, East and West, to determine profound truths. Moving on, we shall first discuss who created this Jowo Buddha statue and what its nature is. In fact, it is a statue that appeared during the lifetime of Shakyamuni Buddha. It was personally authorized and consecrated by the Buddha himself so that such an image could remain in this world. The primary source for this account is the clear mirror on royal genealogies. As many of you may know, this famous historical text was written by Sakya Sonam Gyaltsen, who was a teacher of Je Tsongkhapa. He authored this very renowned history book, also known as the Clear Mirror on Tibetan royal genealogies. Back when I was in normal school, around the age of 22, I bought this book at the Xinhua bookstore in Garzê. Then I went home and read it. At that time, across our entire normal school, both teachers and students were quite concerned with history. In that book, some details, including the transitions between various dynasties and the history of the early and later dissemination of the Dharma, were all explained very minutely. I read it very thoroughly. While I might not recall every point clearly now, some parts remain vivid in my memory. Especially regarding the Jowo Buddha in Lhasa, it says that during the Buddha's lifetime, Manjushri Bodhisattva once requested of him, "After you pass into parinirvana, what should sentient beings rely upon for their prayers? Please guide us." Finally, the Buddha gave his permission. At that time, light reportedly emanated from the Buddha's body, and 4 rays of light shone upon Brahma, Narayana, Indra, and a divine artisan named Vishvakarman. We often refer to him as the illusory artisan, who was a master of divine craftsmanship. The Buddha then granted permission to create Buddha statues, saying, "Use these statues to represent me. They can benefit future generations." Later, Brahma, Narayana, and Indra, these 3 celestial beings, provided various precious jewels, and the master artisan Vishvakarman created these supports of the 3 jewels. The support of the Dharmakaya was a stupa, as the Dharmakaya itself cannot be depicted. Then there was the Sambhogakaya statue of Shakyamuni Buddha, and a Nirmanakaya statue was also crafted. Subsequently, these representations, such as the stupa, were invited to the celestial realms. The Sambhogakaya statue was later invited to the great ocean, to the far shores, likely no longer in the human realm. Then, regarding the Nirmanakaya statue, it remained in our human world. Later, after the statues were finished, the Buddha performed the consecration and gave a prophecy. Wherever these status reside in the future, it will benefit countless sentient beings. During the creation process, the Buddha authorized life-size statues of him at age 8, age 12, and age 25. As for how they were crafted, Mahaprajapati Gautami, the Buddha's maternal aunt, was very familiar with the Buddha's physical proportions. Based on her guidance for the Buddha at age 8, it was based on the height of a staircase in a house in Lumbini. For the Buddha at age 12, it was based on the threshold of a door in Shravasti, using the architectural features of a building as a reference for measurement. Thus, he crafted these statues respectively. This is roughly how the origins of these statues in India began. That is the general account. Additionally, some later texts, including the Chronicle of China and Tibet, Agya Bod Yigchang, written by Tak Changpa Paljor Sangpo, cite scriptural authority in his historical records that is fundamentally consistent with the above. The only difference mentioned is that as the Buddha approached parinirvana and was heading toward the city of Kushinagar, Manjushri Bodhisattva asked, "Who will future sentient beings rely upon to be tamed?" The Buddha replied, "Use my physical representation to tame them and subdue the hordes of Maras." He then authorized the creation of the statue, and such an image was indeed made. Descriptions are mainly provided provided from this perspective. Furthermore, in the Tibetan tradition, there is a very famous work called Kachem Kakolma, a Terma text attributed to King Songtsen Gampo, which was later discovered from within a pillar. This Terma retrieved from inside the pillar also recounts these events. At that time, for Maitreya Bodhisattva and others, statues of Shakyamuni Buddha were created, the 8-year-old and 12-year-old life-size statues. Furthermore, the Buddha personally consecrated them. This is what the tradition says. Therefore, this account is very reliable. One can describe these hidden truths through historical evidence to everyone. After the statues were completed, historical accounts differ. According to the clear mirror on royal genealogies, this statue of the Buddha was in the celestial realm, worshipped by celestial beings for 100 years. Then Dakinis invited it to the land of Odiyana for 500 years. Afterward, a great master with supernatural powers invited it back from the realm of Dakinis. Finally, it was enshrined at Vajrasana in India for 500 years. That is one account. There is a slight variation in the Testament of the Pillar, which states it was worshipped in the celestial realm for 500 years. Then in the realm of Dakinis, meaning Dakinis invited it to the land of Odiyana, it was worshipped for 500 years. When it later came to the human world, it was enshrined at Nalanda Monastery for 500 years. So during its time in India, it was there for roughly 1,500 years, either in India or other various places. Regarding Nalanda Monastery, as you may know, the original founder of Nalanda, some history books say, was Rahula. According to the Vajrayana tradition, it was the Mahasiddha Saraha, it seems, who was the initial founder of Nalanda, but we can verify that later by checking the records. After being enshrined at Nalanda, it is said that it later came to the Han region. Regarding the process of it coming to the Han region, in the histories I mentioned, there are also different accounts. First, according to the clear mirror on royal genealogies, an Indian king at that time named Dharmapala was threatened by the armies of other countries. He then sought help from the king of the Han region. The king of Han not only provided him with military forces, but also sent some important precious items, including a brocade robe. King Dharmapala at that time offered it to another country. That country also sent troops, and the king of Han sent troops as well. Ultimately, the foreign invasion he faced ended in total victory. After the victory, he wanted to send a gift to thank the king of Han. The king of Han requested supports of the 3 jewels. What did he specifically ask for? He asked for Buddha statues, scriptures, and a Sangha community, representatives of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. As for the statue, he needed the 12-year-old life-sized statue. The scriptures included the Ratnarashi Sutra and others. There were several classics. Regarding the Sangha, it meant a Sangha well-versed in the sutras, Abhidharma, Vinaya, and Prajnaparamita. King Dharmapala later granted the request of the king of Han. From that time on, the 12-year-old life-size statue was provided to the king of Han. Of course, regarding this Dharmapala, according to some historical records, later in the 8th century, during the time of King Trisong Detsen, there was a king Dharmapala who was also a Buddhist king. But if it were he who gave it to the Han region, then the timeline might be difficult to reconcile, as there is a gap of about 100 years. Why? Because the Jowo Buddha statue was brought by Princess Wencheng from the Han region, and Princess Wencheng's time was during the reign of King Songtsen Gampo, so the contemporary King Dharmapala of the 8th century might be a bit hard to explain. However, I think in the history of Indian Buddhism there were many kings named Dharmapala. There were many such kings, so an earlier King Dharmapala actually obtained the statue. After obtaining the statue, it was later invited to Tibet. This account is also quite plausible. That is one perspective. This is one version. Actually, this account is fundamentally the same as the one in the Testament of the Pillar. The only difference in that version is that the statue was first at Nalanda for about 100 years. Then, when an invasion by non-Buddhist armies occurred, Buddhism in that region was essentially wiped out. Later, it was transferred to the Flying Temple, the Temple of Udantapuri. It stayed there for over 100 years before being brought to the Han region. There is an account like that as well. Regardless of the specifics, according to the histories mentioned earlier, why did the Jowo Buddha statue come to the Han region? In fact, it was likely due to exchanges of a certain nature between the Indian king and the Han king, or perhaps as a return gift. For these reasons, it arrived in the Han region. There is, of course, a slightly different account found in the Red Annals. According to the Red Annals, this statue might have come from the kingdom of Kucha in Xinjiang. It came down from that direction. What was the reason? The Red Annal states that because the Han region was not yet unified at that time, Kucha was considered a small kingdom. Certain kings of the Han region began preparing to invade Kucha. If they were not given the Buddha statue, the Pandita, and the relics, if these were not handed over, they intended to mobilize their army. It seems they had an army of 400,000 or something like that. At that time, Kumarajiva was still quite young. The Pandita they referred to was Kumarajiva. The Buddha statue was the life-sized image, along with relics, etc. There is a rather complex history involved. From the perspective of the Red Annals, it seems it was Kumarajiva at the time. In any case, through a unique turn of events, they seized them from Kucha. That is to say, the life-size statue and Kumarajiva were brought to Chang'an around the year 401 AD, brought to Chang'an. If calculated this way, I think this timeline fits historically, since from 400 AD to 600 AD, it would have been in Chang'an during this period. The statue was in Chang'an. Then, about 100 or 200 years later, it came to Tibet. During the height of the Tang dynasty, as the Dharma gradually declined toward the end of the Tang dynasty. So, regarding its time in the Han region, it is indeed very likely that it arrived in the Han region during the era of King Dharmapala. If that's the case, its route would have been by sea. There are records of a very grand ceremony held to invite the Buddha statue into the imperial palace when it first arrived in the Han region. There are such records. If it came down via Xinjiang, it would have traveled from India, Pakistan and Kashmir, then to Xinjiang and finally to Chang'an. If that was the history, then a few years later, it began its journey to Tibet. In any case, the history of the Jowo Buddha in the Han region is not very detailed. There isn't much in Han Chinese materials and history books. Academics also note that whether in the New Book of Tang or the Old Book of Tang, among many historical sources, how the Jowo Buddha statue came to the Han region and how it was worshipped there, and later how Emperor Taizong of Tang, Li Shimin, gave it to Tibet. All this is not very prominent in Han Chinese historical records. However, in famous Tibetan sources such as A Feast for the Learned or the Red Annals, and likely the Blue Annals as well, this history is quite detailed in many of them. Why is it not prominent in the Han region? Some scholars believe there are two possibilities. One possibility is that the statue was enshrined within the imperial palace. This was a very private matter. Therefore, many treasures and precious items in the palace were not necessarily made public. That is one explanation. There is another explanation. The Han region was not unified at that time. During the southern and northern dynasties and the 16 kingdoms, there was constant turmoil and the flames of war were everywhere. Under such various complex historical conditions, many historical details were actually obscured. It was not just the Buddha statue. Very little history from the inland during that era has survived to this day. There could be various causes and conditions. In any case, it remained in the Han region for many years, at least several centuries. The Jowo Buddha statue became an object of devotion for Han believers. This is its history there. Afterward, it began its journey to Tibet. Regarding its arrival in Tibet, I think anyone who has read some history will know. When Princess Wencheng was married to Tibet, how she petitioned her royal father to bring this Buddha statue with her, because the ministers and king of Tibet also had such a wish. Initially, her father did not quite agree, but eventually he consented to let the Jowo Buddha statue be taken to Tibet by Princess Wencheng. Originally, the 12-year-old life-size statue was supposed to be enshrined in Jokhang Temple. However, before this, the Nepalese princess, Princess Prikuti, had also brought a Buddha statue from Nepal, the 8-year-old life-size statue. How was this statue brought? The history of the 8-year-old statue is recorded in relevant historical records from both Nepal and Tibet. This 8-year-old statue, blessed by the Buddha himself, was later invited into the Naga palace. It remained in the Naga palace for 2,000 years. Later, the Naga king fell ill. At that time, a great master from Nepal used special spiritual powers to bestow blessings, and all of the Naga king's illnesses vanished. He then requested if the statue could be returned to the human realm. The Naga king agreed, and it was invited from the Naga palace. Subsequently, it was enshrined in the royal palace of Nepal. Later, when King Songtsen Gampo received the Nepalese princess, she brought it to Tibet. So looking at history, King Songtsen Gampo was truly extraordinary. In any case, he invited the most supreme treasures from different countries. For instance, the one from Nepal was a national treasure, and it was invited to Tibet. The one from the Han region was also a national treasure from the imperial palace. He invited it to Tibet as well. At that time, when Princess Wencheng brought the statue to Tibet, we don't know for certain, perhaps from the princess's perspective at that moment. Initially, the 8-year-old statue was in Yokang Temple, and the 12-year-old statue was in Ramosh Temple. That was how it was at the very beginning. Logically, Jokang should house the larger statue and Ramosh the smaller one, but perhaps because when they first arrived, the Nepalese princess had come first, her statue was enshrined in Jokang. Princess Wencheng arrived later, so the statue she brought was placed in Ramosha Temple. There is also another statue in Tibet, if you go to pay homage in the future, called Lokeshvara. Songtsen Gampo himself, some say it was created through miraculous manifestation, created the Lokeshvara statue. It is now in the Potala Palace. These are the Jowo, Shakya and Namsi of Lhasa. One is the wish-fulfilling jewel, the Lhasa Jowo. One is the Shakyamuni, and one is the Lokeshvara. The Lokeshvara is currently in the Potala Palace, and it is the most important object of worship there. You can go and pay homage now. These three are extremely significant to all of Lhasa. They have been enshrined and worshipped to this very day. It has been many years since the time of King Songtsen Gampo. King Songtsen Gampo lived around the early 7th century. Given that, how have they been preserved through different historical periods until now? In fact, the history is very tortuous. When I went to pay homage to the statue before, I felt it was truly not easy. It has survived through all the trials and tribulations. You might remember a couple of years ago, there was a time when the Jowo statue in Jokang caught fire. At that time, all people with faith throughout the world were extremely saddened. Fortunately, the fire was extinguished very quickly, and so on. Throughout the history of the Lhasa Jowo, there have been many different twists and turns. These occurred during both the early and later propagation periods. During the early propagation period, there was the grandson of King Songtsen Gampo, his son's son, named Mangsong Mangsen. At that time, it was heard that the Tang dynasty was planning to take the Buddha statue back to the Han region, to relocate it back. They were extremely anxious at that moment, fearing that the statue would indeed be moved back. So at a place called the Southern Mirror Gate, they hid the statue of Shakyamuni Buddha. They built a wall in front of it, and before that wall, they placed a statue of Manjushri Bodhisattva. To anyone looking at the surface, it appeared that Manjushri was being worshipped. It remained enshrined like this for many years. That is one account. In fact, as everyone later knew, Princess Wencheng, though there are different historical versions, many historians believe Princess Wencheng was the mother of the later King Trisong Detsen. She was also from the Han region. I have briefly introduced this in class before. When she arrived in Tibet, having been married off there, she began to search for the statue brought by Princess Wencheng, her great-aunt, I believe. Later, they retrieved it. As for how it was retrieved, there are also different accounts, including the testament of Ba Jay, we mentioned last time. There are various records within the Ba Jay. There are different versions. Later, it was discovered that 3 dynasties had already passed. In fact, the Lhasa Jowo remained hidden through 3 different reigns, unable to be revealed. It was hidden all that time. In the Great History of Terma by Guru Chowang, which I translated recently, it says, "Among our termas, hidden treasures, some are man-made but hidden and later retrieved. These can also be called terma. In reality, the Lhasa Jowo is also a terma. It says that while in the Han region, under different dynasties, it was a terma that was later retrieved. In Tibet as well, it was hidden twice during the early and later periods. It was retrieved after being hidden. So, during the early propagation period, in the time of Mangsong Mangsen, there was fear it would be snatched back. The situation then was likely very grave, much like certain international situations today. Tibet encountered many troubles at that time, and that was when they hid the Lhasa Jowo. This was an event of the early propagation period. Also during the early propagation period, in the time of King Trisongdetsen, initially Trisongdetsen's authority was not yet fully established. That is to say, one of his maternal uncles was extremely hostile toward Buddhists. He was a follower of another religion and thus had a strong aversion to Buddhism. When Trisongdetsen's father died from a fall off a horse, and after his death this uncle spread rumors everywhere asking, why did Trisongdetsen's father die? He claimed it was because of his Buddhist faith and so on. He then demanded that the Lhasa Jowo Buddha statue, since it came from the Han region, should be sent back there. They then took the Lhasa Jowo out, preparing to send it to the Han region. However, when they reached the outskirts of Lhasa, it became impossible to move. Even with 300 men pulling, they couldn't budge it. Subsequently, they buried it on the spot in a sandbank, likely a sandbank near Lhasa. During the process of burying it, they managed to bury it, but later, the ministers who participated suffered all sorts of misfortunes. Some died, some fell ill, many unfortunate things happened. Then they became frightened, thinking perhaps the Dharma protectors of the Han region were enraged. That leader then ordered it to be dug up. Since the origin of the statue was India, he decided it should be sent to India instead, and so, on the journey of sending it to India, they reached Kairong in Mangyul. Upon reaching that place, it's called Kairong in Mangyul. Having arrived there, at that time, the roads to India were also blocked, so the statue remained there. It ended up staying there for 14 years. Later, when it was brought back, King Trisongdetsen likely arranged for the statues to be placed such that the larger statue was in the Yokang temple and the smaller statue in the Ramoch temple for worship. This was during the early propagation period. These statues also faced challenges, including threats from non-believers and the period of Mangsong Mangsen, which saw external invasions and so forth. But through it all, they survived. Then, between the early and later propagation periods, the persecution of Buddhism by Langdharma occurred. During Langdharma's reign, he ordered that all Buddha statues be burned or destroyed, or buried in the earth or submerged in water. At that time, a group of wise people, some say they hid it in the ground, some say they hid it elsewhere. Regardless, some historical records state that when Lord Atisha came to Tibet, he discovered and revealed them, and so they continued to survive. Then, during certain special periods, they narrowly escaped being destroyed. However, some scholars believe that individual leaders protected these precious relics, allowing them to be preserved. Of course, the statue in Ramoch temple had a different fate. It seems the large statue was not damaged then, but the statue in Ramoch, Akshobhya Vajra, was damaged at that time. One half of its body ended up in the palace museum, where it was later found by the Panchen Lama. The other half was discovered in Lhasa in a pile of refuse. Later, around 1983, since the upper body was at the palace museum and the lower body had been in the trash. In 1983, the 10th Panchen Lama did everything possible to have the Ramoshe statue restored, so I think this too counts as part of its history. As for why these statues of Shakyamuni Buddha are considered so important, we must understand the history. In fact, for anyone who truly reflects on history and considers the various wars, revolutions, or other diverse circumstances in the world, we should realize that many things in this human realm are achieved with great difficulty, since such Buddha statues still exist in the world today. For us of later generations, they are worthy of pilgrimage, prostration, and offerings. Personally, I believe that among all the millions of Buddha statues and stupas throughout the entire world of Jambudvipa, those personally consecrated by Shakyamuni Buddha himself are rare. Of course, throughout different histories, there are various objects representing the three jewels. There are descriptions of these, which I won't go into here. For example, the sandalwood Jowo statue in the inland. We provided a brief introduction to this at the beginning of the Annals of Mount Wutai, but currently it is not possible to pay homage to it. The Buddha tooth relic in Beijing is a genuine tooth of the Buddha, but even that is something Buddhists cannot easily see. Then there is the Buddha tooth in Sri Lanka. That isn't easy to see either. But for the Lhasa Jowo, there is a constant stream of pilgrims every day. Yet I've noticed that many of our Buddhist practitioners don't value it particularly highly. It's as if they don't feel that they absolutely must go on this pilgrimage at least once in their lives, unlike the aspiration held by Tibetan people. For us, everyone feels they must go. However, I think many young Tibetans today seem to lack this concept, which is a bit of a pity. I think it's quite a shame. In principle, if you want to repay the kindness of your parents, you should take them there. If your parents have faith, of course it's good. And even if they don't, Lhasa is now a major tourist destination. You can visit sacred mountains or simply travel. While traveling, take them to pay respects or go on a pilgrimage. There's nothing wrong with that. It is a relic of immense historical significance. In that process, naturally, deeply rooted virtuous seeds will be planted in their stream of being. So today, I also want to say, including those who often listen to my lectures, if you want to leave something precious for your parents, like buying them a house or something, they might not even have time to enjoy it. During their lifetime, if there is nothing else we can do, take them before the Jowo Buddha and chant a prayer. Or even if they don't chant, just to go there, see it, and pay homage to receive the blessing. The power of that is truly inconceivable. In the past, everyone in Tibet used to say, "Can I go on a pilgrimage just once in my life? As long as you reach Lhasa, you will have no regrets whenever you die." This is a universal concept. For a while in the past, however, I thought going or not going made no difference. I once had such discursive thoughts, but as I have reached this age, I keep thinking, wow, what the elderly and the ancients said was truly right. Actually, we young people, when we were young, we didn't necessarily understand. I'm not just speaking about today's youth. Many of us should realize, go on a pilgrimage during your lifetime. When you do, if you are a person of faith, perhaps you will truly receive this special blessing from the Buddha. Of course, many great masters, while paying homage to the Buddha statue, specifically the Jowo statue, had various spiritual experiences. For instance, Longchenpa. His biography states that when he paid homage to the Lhasa Jowo statue, light radiated from the urna, white hair, between its brows, and he attained an inconceivable state of realization. Similarly, Jigme Lingpa, when he went to pay homage to the Jowo statue, he also received blessings. His name is also known as Khyentse and so on. There was also Thangtong Gyalpo and Je Tsongkhapa. When they paid homage back then, the life-sized Shakyamuni statue was originally a Nirmanakaya image. Later, he, Tsongkhapa, offered a 5 Buddha crown. The Jowo statue we often see now is actually a Sambhogakaya image wearing a 5-pointed crown. Many great masters, through these various blessings, brought different benefits to themselves and an inconceivable power to all sentient beings. Thus, for many past great masters, paying homage to this statue was the most important thing in life. I often think, while some people have only paid homage once the other day, a Lama living next to me. He is younger than I am, has been there over 30 times in his life. He goes once every year. His circumstances are not very wealthy, but he goes around chanting prayers to save up for travel expenses. As soon as he has enough money, he goes to Lhasa to make an aspiration before the Jowo statue. He called me a while ago saying he went on a pilgrimage. After paying homage, he returned in just a day and a half. In the past, from our hometown to Lhasa, it used to take 7 days by vehicle. Now travel is much faster. Perhaps due to highways or something, he said it cost 400 wen. From Lhasa back to our hometown, Luhuo, he said the fare was 400 wen, and he's already back. He returned in a day and a half. He was very happy about it. Nowadays, a pilgrimage doesn't cost much. Just bring a bit of sampa and go there to make your vows. He made a personal vow to go once every year. My brother is the same way. When my mother passed away, he vowed to go once a year. Once there, outside the shrine of the Lhasa Jowo, He circumambulates 84 times, as my mother lived to be 84. So his aspiration is to do 84 rounds. He mentioned recently that his legs aren't doing well this year, so he's not sure if he can complete all 84 rounds. But he said as long as he gets there, he will try his best to prostrate. For many of us, the desire to go there is deeply rooted, to go once a year or to go many times throughout one's life. This is a tradition born of sincere devotion. But for many of our Buddhist practitioners, I've heard many people saying lately, I'm going to Mount Kailash on pilgrimage next year. I asked them why they were going, but they didn't have much to say. They just said many people will gather there next year. I suspect that people in business there are constantly putting out all kinds of promotion. Did Mount Kailash itself say it's coming next year, or is it just what others are saying? I'm not quite sure. Certainly there will be many visitors next year, but I feel that whether you go there or not doesn't really matter. However, regarding the Lhasa Jowo, if one day it becomes like the Buddha tooth relic in Beijing or the one in Sri Lanka, which are sometimes difficult to see, if it could no longer be seen, that would truly be a great pity for sentient beings. So I think everyone should bear in mind that paying homage to this statue is very important. Moreover, according to prophecies found in relevant records, it is said that wherever this statue resides, the Buddha Dharma will flourish. I think this might be quite true. Back when it was in India, whether at Nalanda Monastery or the Vajra throne, Bodh Gaya, the Buddha Dharma was so prosperous. Later, the statue left India. From that point on, India fell into a spiritual darkness. Then during the Tang dynasty in that region, the Buddha Dharma was also very much flourishing. After it arrived in Tibet, although Tibet has undergone various historical changes, the Dharma was at times exceptionally vibrant. There were periods of great peak and times of deep valley. Those who have read even a little history or observe the current state of affairs don't need much explanation. But regardless, as long as the statue remains, the Buddha Dharma on the whole will flourish. So now is considered a time when the Dharma is relatively prosperous. If we do not go on pilgrimage now, we might not have the time to do so in this lifetime. For an individual, especially a Buddhist with faith in the Dharma, it is actually very important to pay homage to this statue. Many people say, I want to go on a pilgrimage to this temple, this academy, or this master. Of course, I don't deny the value of that. If you have faith in a certain temple, master or great being, then going there to pay homage and make offerings is perfectly fine. However, one cannot be certain if these places truly benefit your mind stream. But if you make aspirations before the very statue of Shakyamuni Buddha himself, that is undoubtedly very meaningful. Even in His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche's biography, there are accounts of him receiving many blessings from the Jowo statue. This includes his predecessor, the Terton Lerab Lingpa. At that time, a large statue of Guru Rinpoche was retrieved from the Kham region. It is now placed in the Jokang temple. There is another statue in front of it, and the Guru Rinpoche statue is behind. This Guru Rinpoche statue is exceptionally blessed and quite large. Also within the Jokang temple there are many extraordinary statues of Guru Rinpoche, including a relatively large one in front. But the most historical one is the Guru Rinpoche statue retrieved by Terton Lerab Lingpa. And then there is the Jowo statue. There are many other exceptionally sublime blessings. When His Holiness went there, he also received from the Jowo statue blessings, the emission of light and so forth. At that time, Terton Lerab Lingpa retrieved a statue of Vajravarahi from the heart of the Jowo. Many such miraculous things have happened. I think for us Buddhists, if one has very sincere faith to go there and pray and make aspirations earnestly, of course, I hear there are many pilgrims now, so you might not have a long time inside, but at least at the entrance of the Jokang, every day there are so many people prostrating, paying homage and offering lamps. I think the people in the Lhasa area are truly very fortunate. They can go to circumambulate every day. They can go to make offerings every day. Every day some are performing full prostrations, some are making offerings and paying respects and so on. This is extremely meaningful. Speaking in this way, it might seem as though I'm giving everyone some kind of travel introduction, but I simply can't help it. I feel that for many Buddhists, life is impermanent. If you don't manage to go on pilgrimage during your lifetime, it would be a great pity anxiety. Many people say, my parents don't have faith. What should I do? I want to help them. If you truly want to help them, you can coax them into going there for a trip. Then, without them realizing it, take them to the Jokhang temple in Lhasa. Let them pay homage under the guise of tourism. Even if they don't have faith, it's fine. By merely paying homage there, an important seed will be planted within their mind stream. This is also very meaningful. In general, paying homage to this Buddha statue severs the 3 poisons or the 5 poisons, increases your faith and wisdom, and gains you the power of non-retrogression. In particular, your own practice will reach a successful conclusion. In the past, every year I would release captive animals, engage in teaching, debating and writing, as well as study and meditation. Then at the end of the year I would go there. I would perform 100 prostrations nearby, begin circumambulating 100 times in the morning, and chant the Samantabhadra's King of Aspiration prayers. Many people in Tibet go outside the shrine of the Jowo Buddha to offer 100,000 mandalas. Some go there to complete the 500,000 preliminary practices. There are many such ways of pilgrimage. Generally speaking, for some of us, it is quite difficult to transform our mind stream solely through study and meditation. But for those who should go, actually, if it's not during the peak tourist season, the travel expenses, I often check them, even if I can't go myself. I check how much airfare is from the mainland to Lhasa and how much for the return. It seems every time I check, the return ticket is slightly more expensive. But going from other places is also relatively easy. Of course, not just from the mainland. For many people worldwide, if you are able to go on pilgrimage. Throughout such a long history, a statue with such great blessing, personally consecrated by Shakyamuni Buddha, personally blessed and personally prophesied. Such a statue is indeed extremely rare in this world today. I am not explaining this with any ulterior motives. I have no connection with the staff related to that statue. But I always think in my heart, if sentient beings have the opportunity to pray and dedicate their merit before such a sublime Buddha statue, then their lives will be meaningful. Shakyamuni Buddha himself stated in relevant sutras that regardless of the form of his image, to see, hear, touch, or remember it all carry immense merit and blessing. For an average person, even placing a Buddha image in front to visualize and pray to, the merit of that is inconceivable. How much more meaningful it is, then, to pay homage before a statue with such ancient history and sublime blessings. So today I have briefly introduced to you all the sublime merit of Shakyamuni Buddha's statue, including its history. I've asked many people how this statue came to be. Even some who study history or religious studies might not be able to explain it very clearly. So I think you should all look more into the information related to the Jowo statue. Why did it travel such a circuitous route from India to China and from China to Tibet? Why do so many people go there? I remember when religious practice first became open again in the 1980s, all the Tibetan people would ride in those big trucks. Back then, there were 2 types of trucks, one called Dongfang and the other Jiefang. The Dongfang could hold more people while the Jiefang held fewer, but they all went in the winter since everyone was busy in the summer, both the farmers and the nomads. When winter came, they would all sit packed in those trucks. Nowadays, many people look back at that time with envy. It took a full 7 days from the Kham region to get there. Upon arriving, everyone was filled with great joy. Some walked on foot, carrying their luggage. It took about 2 or 3 months. Some prostrated every 3 steps. Even now, so many people still go. Are all these people really so foolish? No, that's not it. It depends on one's perspective. Everyone has a different way of understanding history. But most importantly, what some of us see as seemingly foolish behavior is actually the wisest and smartest. Sometimes what we see as being the smartest and most capable might just be someone stubborn in their own views. They might end up doing many things wrong. In human history, there are all sorts of situations, so you should think about it. We often see those along the roadside prostrating every 3 steps, whether it is snowing or raining, prostrating in the mud. Some lead goats, some lead dogs, some push tricycles, all kinds of people. Some are elderly, and there were many pilgrimage stories in the past. Are all these people besides yourself just fools? Likely not. Within their hearts there is a very powerful force. If we were asked to walk like that, perhaps we couldn't even make it 100 kilometers Buddhas, that's a possibility. Then why do they do it? Is what they do truly in vain? Not necessarily. So each of us should break through our own boundaries. Look at my own perception. I may assume it is the truth, but perhaps at a certain point, this perception of yours will prove incorrect. Initially, you thought others' views were wrong, but it never occurred to you, oh, so their view was the most correct one. This includes some who oppose Buddhism. At first, they feel that believing in Buddhism is superstition, unreasonable, and so on. There are many such claims. But when they finally truly immerse themselves, truly practice and study, they realize, oh, so my own past behavior was perhaps not quite reasonable. And their thinking at the time was clouded by ignorance, unjustifiable. There are such statements and thoughts. They will surely discover their own mistakes. So what I mainly want to say today is, if you have the chance in the future, you should still go on pilgrimage to these highly blessed Buddha statues. This for your life might be very meaningful. Please think about this carefully. Thank you.
Tirgana jirano chupai, chupun zolen droa droa bandangara badna sodargye bandangara badna sodargye bandangara badna sodargye